out of the range of the camera. And we'll also work to make sure that if there's something you do want to share at that moment, but you may not want it on camera, we've warned Thea about that. This is Thea Rogers from HowlRound. She's our support here. So a couple of announcements. Downstairs now, there are Post-its per room, so that tomorrow morning, if you decide you'd like to convene or be a part of an affinity group, you could sign up or start one. Yeah. Some of the rooms like this are larger, so you could say, hey, we'll be over in this corner, make draw a line, or create however many to share a room too. Also, I want to share with you that at 11:20, our space will become a space that includes everybody that's here in this building this morning within our ConFest, because we're making a special plan. And I'd like to invite everybody to stay for that, and it will involve a plan for later today. So we'll give more details then. With that, is there anything else we need to mention?
No public service announcements. I think that's
it for now.
Yeah.
This is Mary Catherine Nagel.
Hi. Good morning.
She'll share more about herself. I'm Leslie Ishii, and I'd like to start, as I often do, with breath. So if you care to stand, lay down, or sit, I'll sit. Feel your feet on the floor. And at any time throughout our session, please, I have an acupuncturist that says, if you have pain or discomfort, move. Change your position. So feel that you can do that at any time. So feet on the floor. Hi, Jeff. Welcome. Come on.
Good morning.
We're in HowlRound, so just to let you know, anytime you can opt out of being visible. So let's take a collective breath together. Breathing in. Sigh out. Making sound out is also an option. Breathing in again. And I invite you to soften your gaze, or perhaps close your eyes if you feel safe. We're holding the space here for you, for safety. Knowing that we all share this dialogue that will go on this morning, acknowledging our privileges so that we make space for those who have been underrepresented, endured oppression, knowing the barriers and the challenges to speak or be visible, so that there is room and time to express, for everyone to be heard as they choose. Continuing to breathe, bringing your hand to your belly. Noticing you could also open up and widen your back as you breathe. And in this next breath, we acknowledge our ancestors. Breathing in and breathing out. And we acknowledge the land upon which we are set, the First Nations, indigenous natives that came before us and who are still with us now. Breathing in. Notice your breath. Notice your rhythm. What is your rhythm if there's no need to regulate or manage your breath? Can you just soften your jaw, your shoulders? Breathing into your back. You could actually let the gut go, let the belly relax. And maybe even teeter back and forth a little bit on your sit bones. Yes. Feeling your feet to the floor. again, the ground upon which we are set. Respect for Mother Earth and all who have traveled upon this ground. Acknowledging Oregon Shakespeare Festival, who has generously lent this space and who holds a particular history in the building of this organization as well. Knowing their intentions are to move forward to reclaim equity, diversity, and inclusion. And one more collective breath and a big sigh of relief. As we breathe in our own rhythms, I now toss the baton for her to catch to Mary Catherine Nagel, my beloved creative partner.
Thank you. I'm going to stand because I can't sit and talk. I'm like, maybe the lawyer in me. But, so I'm really thrilled and honored to be here today, and especially to get to work with Leslie, who is phenomenal, as I'm sure many of you know. And I'm really excited about the session that we have, but I think we've constructed this session that we think will get to the core of some of the issues we're facing as we collaborate together on a new musical called Sunrise Prayer. But on that note, this is really a session that is designed to foster dialogue, to create communication, and we don't have to follow the PowerPoint. We don't have to follow any set agenda, and we are going to be talking about things that are deeply personal, because these stories that we're telling are deeply personal, and sharing them does make us vulnerable in a way. So if at any point in time you have something you really want to share, or you feel like, I don't want to go to that next slide, you had something up about a Supreme Court case that I really need to talk about, please don't feel like it's not like we have this PowerPoint and we have to get through it, and there's no rules, if that makes sense. Did we plan to introduce ourselves, or should we do that after we start should we do that now? Or what do you think? Now or after?
Yeah, maybe now.
Okay. So, because...
I changed my mind.
After?
You're right. Your instinct was right.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, it's very fluid. It's very fluid.
Yeah. You're seeing how we work.
So I have a little PowerPoint, and I don't want to dwell on it too long, but I think it will provide some of the context for how we're... So just a little bit background on me. I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation. I was born in Oklahoma, but before the removal, my great-great-grandfather was in what is now northern Georgia, or Rome, Georgia today, if anyone here is from Georgia or familiar with the area. And actually in the 1830s, fought very hard in the United States Supreme Court and won an amazing victory that I'd love to tell you all about, even more in depth, and I have written a separate play on that, called Worcester v. Georgia. And it was a phenomenal case in which the Supreme Court said, Cherokee Nation is a sovereign nation. The state of Georgia can't come in and try to exercise jurisdiction on its lands. Georgia was trying to kill Cherokees and take their land because, well, many things, but mostly just greed. And they discover gold on Cherokee lands, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I come from when I come to tell these stories and to share these stories. And that's a very specific perspective, and it's one that obviously I can't speak for everyone, but I think when Leslie and I started to work together on this musical, and we have two other collaborators that can't be with us today, Ty and Tataya, who are phenomenal, and they're working on kind of the music and the lyrics, and by no means is there like anything that's a finished, polished product. It's been a lot of research and conversation. But we recognize that we essentially were bringing to the table, two Asian, two Native American collaborators, and what did that mean? Because when you look around the United States, and this is me speaking, and I don't want to put words into Leslie, but I, as a Native playwright, I see and I actually wrote a How to Run piece on this like a couple years ago, but statistically, Americans are more likely to walk into a theater today and see a performance of Red Face on the American stage than an actual depiction of an actual Native artist. That's what, you could do the math, right? If you count up, because Bloody Bloody has Red Face, I don't want to start like listing all the Red Face plays in the world, but they have far more circulation right now, especially once they get to Broadway, than legitimate plays by Native artists. Now, I think that we're at the tipping point. You know, OSF has commissioned numerous Native playwrights now. They're producing Randy Reinholdt's musical Off the Rails next year, and that's amazing. I mean, I don't think they've produced a Native playwright in 90 or so years, but they're doing it, and the majority of American theaters can't point to a single Native playwright they've produced. Okay, so that's my little soapbox. But you know, and I can't speak for the Asian community, but it's my assessment is it seems somewhat similar in that yellowface is still very popular. And it's not about pitting us against each other and saying who has it worse. That's a horrible conversation that has been used for horrible purposes for hundreds of years. So we're not going to have that conversation here today. Instead, we're discussing, well, what do we understand about why these two, yellowface and redface, still exist? And how do we come together? If we want to tell a story, which our story specifically is the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II on Indian reservations, okay? And we know these are two tokenized communities whose identities are frequently appropriated and misrepresented on the American stage. And we're coming together, and I'm not Japanese American, and Leslie's not Native American. How do we communicate with one another? So that actually, we have a really exciting PowerPoint, because I'm also an attorney. So I write everything out.
That's the beauty of it.
But you know, so you'll be like, why are we talking about all these legal cases? But so these are some of the questions that we started asking ourselves: is, you know, how do we come together and create art for both of our communities without repeating the harmful misrepresentations and appropriations that surround us? There might be some hard conversations. There might be some moments where I write a character and Leslie says, "Are you kidding me? Like, where did you get that? You know, where did you get that idea that a Japanese American would ever say something like that?" But these are the conversations that we have to prepare ourselves to have and be comfortable having, and not come from a place of entitlement or, you know, I'm an artist. I mean, this is what I hear all the time when I say, well, gosh, do you understand that we have this history of, we have the highest rates of suicide in our Native American community. So when you portray, when this is your use of red face on stage and you have the character that's not played by a Native person kill himself, do you understand how that impacts our Native youth who might see this? And they get very, you know, so kind of conversations like that, and a lot of times non-Native artists will get very defensive instead of being open to exploring how something they don't understand about an identity they're putting on stage could really harm or further perpetuate a harmful stereotype. So, knowing that we are going to operate in certain areas without sufficient knowledge or experience, can we create some protocols or some agreements between ourselves about how we're going to engage in this work and have these conversations? So that's, I want to breeze through this because we want to get, I think, more quickly. Leslie, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted, I was just going to kind of be the
Yeah, I don't want to sit here on a PowerPoint. I don't want it to be me talking at you for 45 minutes. So we can come back to any of these points. And this is a little synopsis of it. And essentially, it's about a young girl named Alyssa, and she's Japanese American. She gets picked up by the FBI and taken. It's a long story about how plot-wise we get there, because the FBI was picking, many of you may know, picking up people on December 7th, right after the bombing, but picked up different people for various reasons, and then the next May, you know, rounded everyone up on the West Coast. But the Poston War Relocation Center was the largest, and it's on the Colorado River Indian Tribe Reservation. And a lot of the internment camps were placed on reservations. The Colorado River Indian Tribe I mean, every tribe is unique, but it's an especially unique situation because it was created in 1865, the reservation was, by the federal government, and it's on the traditional homelands of the Mojave. And the Mojave in their language means people by the river. They lived by the Colorado River for thousands, since time immemorial. And they have their creation story comes from a mountain that where Colorado River Indian Tribes is today, their reservation, the mountain's just a little bit north of there. That's their creation story. This is where they come from. Well, the federal government just started putting other tribes and people on on their reservation, forcibly removing in some instances. So the Chemehuevi are there now, and there are Hopi and Navajo folks as well. So you've got 4 different Native peoples, right, all living under one tribal government, one now sovereign Indian nation, which is the Colorado River Indian tribes. So they have their own story, and actually, to do research with them, I went and met with their tribal council, and because I'm not Mojave, I'm not a citizen of Colorado River Indian tribes, right? Like, I'm just as much of an outsider as anyone else, and said, we really want to do this work, but we want to do it in a respectful way. And they said, well, please put in an application about what the research is that you want to do. And so I did that, and so I've met with them several times. They did vote, and they gave me approval to do this research and tell this story. And they're like, our only request is that you do the first performance of the musical here on the reservation. I know, isn't that cool?
So what you're noticing is part of the protocol, permission from the elders first, right? And then our proposal, and then further conversation.
Yeah, and so I've actually gotten to talk to people who were around when this was all happening in the 40s, because some of them are still with us, thankfully. And one person who I interviewed, Veronica Homer, who was on the tribal council for a long time and has been a really amazing leader nationally in Indian country. Her father worked at the internment camp. And I mean, it's crazy to think about. And at Poston, the tribal council vetoed, so the federal government came in and basically said, we're gonna create an internment camp here for the Japanese, and that's what we're gonna do, the War Department. And the tribal council for the tribe said, no, you're not, this is our land. And we're saying, no, you don't have our permission. And the federal government was like, we don't care, you don't have a say. And they opened it up anyways. And so the tribe still has like all these archives of the resolutions they passed saying this is illegal under our law, we're not allowing this to happen. And then of course, but as you can imagine, just like with many tribes across the country, their own life force and their way of sustaining themselves for thousands of years was cut off. Like, you can't access those lands to farm anymore. We're going to kill all the game you live off of, et cetera, where until you get to the point around World War II where most tribal populations are living in extreme poverty because they can't feed themselves the way they have for thousands of years. And it's like, oh, just go be a capitalist. And it's like, well, wait a second. We're living in a really remote area. What kind of capitalism do you expect me to engage in? So we had high unemployment on the reservation. And so numerous people turned to the relocation center for employment. So you've got this story that is just really true, based on true things, that really needs to be told, but is also very sensitive, right? Because we're dealing with Japanese American internment and an Indian reservation, and with a very specific story that a lot of people might gloss over. So I want to breeze through this so we can get to discussion. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Go for it. We're getting there, yeah.
So this is, on February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. And so, for those of you who may not know the exact numbers, it was during World War II that 17,867 individuals of Japanese ancestry, many were American citizens, were incarcerated in Poston. And so you can go there today, and actually I wish I had put some of these photos in here, but I didn't. They have, in the 90s, they got back together with some survivors of the camp and members of the tribe, and they created a beautiful memorial. It's very nice. And so you can go to the actual site of the camp, and so there's part of it, there were separate sections of the camp, and there was like 1, 2, and 3, and a couple of them are just totally gone, but one is still there. It's a little sad, because when you go, it's very dilapidated, and they haven't kept it up, and it just is like, so that, I don't know, the tribe has talked about maybe trying to restore it, but it's like, make it a museum, I don't know, but maybe that's something that could come from doing a musical like this, is that kind of a collaboration and restoration of a place to honor and remember.
I would add too that we have folks here that internment is their legacy in the room, if I'm correct, yes? What camps were your families at, if you care to share?
I'm from Oregon. I'm with a group out there, diaspora. I'm from Oregon, but
yes.
My father was born in Hood River, and when he was like 16, they were sent to Tule Lake, which had a reputation of being a horrible camp. So that was really, yeah, it was.
My father's family was in the Bay Area, in the East Bay in California, and they were sent to Topaz in Utah. And my mom's family actually was living in a town called Delta, Utah. My grandfather worked for the railroad. And so when he lost his job, they got moved from Delta to Salt Lake City because Delta was a small little railroad town and he had no reason to be there any longer. But strangely enough, Delta is the railroad stop for Topaz. So all of the California Japanese that were going to Topaz got offloaded in Delta as my mom's family was moving to Salt Lake.
Yeah, from mine, actually, I'm from Canada. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, my family was in Vancouver, and they got moved to. But the system was similar, but different in the sense that in Canada there was a whole valley, the Slocan Valley, which is in the interior of British Columbia, the province, and a number of camps and a number of sites were in that area, and my family moved there, and then moved east to Toronto.
Yeah, understanding in my own research, meeting folks with your background, and it was a very unique experience. Still, obviously horrendous. Anybody else?
I have 4 great uncles who were in the 442nd. They weren't interned because the family was in Hawaii, but they were removed from their business of the family bakery, and 3 of the uncles made it back. 1 was lost in Italy.
My grandparents and great-grandparents were in Manzanar, and actually my dad's parents met there.
There were marriages and families started in camp. Yeah.
It's really ironic.
Yeah. Yeah. I know my family was interned in Minidoka, Idaho. They were out of Seattle, Washington, and, so there were 10 camps total. Yeah. Part of this project is to see how awarely, our challenge is to see how awarely we can create a play, never forgetting the historical context. So many plays are created on our emotion and certainly our imagination opens up. But when we do things around history, but I'm learning for myself, I think I have to look at historical context no matter what. Again, the ground upon which we are set, what informed my imagination? What shaped me to have this thought, to think that I might want to write a play or create, collaborate on any idea really, or even the way I move through our ConFest, our theater, the world. It's informing everything. It's reshaping how I actually proceed in life. And that is coupled with, again, obviously with how you create your day every day. So, did you have a thought, Randy?
I have a question. In creating a play, why a musical, and what does music? How does music play into the decision process of making a musical, and also the cultures? Because I think with musicals, it's very interesting about how that gets translated into cultural play, right? So you see something like in the Heights, and it's something about that, and then something like Allegiance, right? Which is what does that music represent? How does that music represent the culture?
Right.
So.
Well, I can't speak for Ty Defoe or to Ty, our composers and lyricists, but I was interested in a musical and this collaboration because I think, at least coming from my own Japanese heritage background and deep conversations with Ty around music and rhythm, I think one of the ways we feel the essence of who we are is in our own rhythm. I mentioned, find your own breath rhythm. Assimilation would manage that. How we pretzel ourselves constantly into a mainstream, trying to work our way through our lives, changes our rhythm. So I was interested in reclaiming my own rhythm and what it would mean for our team to reclaim or utilize their rhythms. And I feel that's at the essence of culture. And a lot of times when we're misappropriated or appropriated, the rhythm's completely obliterated. So it starts with, for me, it starts with that essence. And what would it be to have a musical where we have those two cultural rhythms get to figure out how to coexist? And to me, symbolically, as director and collaborator on this, that would be an interesting process and feat even. How do we do that if we complicate that different than the simplistic misinformation of a stereotype or an appropriation? So that was my charge for myself. Yeah. And if musicals, as we know them, share a heightened state, what is that going to sound like for us? We don't even know yet. We don't know yet. And I'll share with you that one of the key things Ty and Mary Catherine and Tataya and I've talked about is we're very clear that this process is going to be a healing process. We're not just writing and saying, hey, here we go. Da, 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 da. No, it's actually every step of the way. It may take a while because we're healing as we go. We know that's got to be part of it if we're going to actually reclaim and find our rhythms and what that means together.
Yeah, the first idea of it really came about 1.5 years ago. And I've spent the last 1.5 years going to the reservation in Arizona and just spending time with people and creating relationships and not forcing anything and just, and actually it was kind of funny, like, I don't know, everyone has their own belief system, but for me, I try not to feel, I always want to question, am I feeling entitled to this story? Like, why am I telling this story? What does this story mean to me? And why should I be the one to share it? And maybe I shouldn't be the one to share it. And that's fine too. Maybe it's that I go on this exploration and it's someone else that's supposed to share this story, because I truly believe it should be shared. But you put yourself in the place and things happen. And I just ended up sitting next to Veronica Homer at a dinner in San Diego. We were at an Indian law conference, and a mutual friend of ours was having a birthday, and she's like, yeah, I'm from Crit. And I was like, what? And because I had just been out there the day before just to meet with people, and I hadn't met her. And we're now like in San Diego, which is, several hours away. And anyways, we just started talking. She's like, you have to come, I have to introduce you to this person and this person, you gotta come. And it just happened. But I went into it with the idea of maybe this isn't my story to share, and maybe this is someone else's story to share. And then if I am gonna be the conduit, then what does that look like, and how do I respect that process? And the music part is, it's funny, I've never worked on a musical before, so we'll see. I'm writing the book, and I love music, and I obsessively listen to it. Like, I am a very obsessive, constantly when I write, I'm always listening to music. And I have a somewhat obsessive personality that might be oversharing, but I will listen to sometimes the same song on repeat if I'm in the zone or whatever. But I don't write music. I don't, it's not. And I like this question because I think it raises some important issues. I'm used to seeing Native music depicted on stage or in movies as dun 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 dun. It's always some horrible drum beat that has no affiliation with any actual tribal culture. And then it's some country artist coming out of a teepee and talking about a wigwam, and I don't know, it's always some horrible music video. So, that's how our music has been portrayed in mainstream culture in America. So how do we put, the Mojave have these beautiful bird songs. Maybe I can play one. I don't know if I can find one really quick, but I swear it'll be unlike anything you've ever heard. And when I was out there this last time, let me see if I can just find bird song, because I know I sent it to you guys. Okay.
This research inspires our team to tie it about thinking about a bird song.
Oh, it would have been in March.
That's somewhat connected to some research that we found for the Japanese culture too, where we have some similarities, Yeah.
Man, I thought I emailed it to you guys. I did though, right?
I think you did. But while you look, I can share with you that also our inspiration came because my brother goes to the Tule Lake Pilgrimage. Again, in Northern California, there's a camp there every 2 years. And he's gone into, was a musician in New York and a French hornist, and then eventually became someone who's practicing acupuncture and herbology. And he goes to China. So he's doing his own very deep exploration of healing and practice. And we keep talking about how do we share with the Tule Lake pilgrimage that was, how do we share a healing process? When folks go, it is. But we want to bring in the native culture because that particular camp was built on sacred burial ground. And it's like, oh, this is like unconscionable. So how do we continue to develop a healing process for our communities? And how do we do it together? And when I met Mary Catherine and Ty and Tataya, that made sense to maybe this is part of that, a response, at least one of the responses. So, yeah. And it also led to, in meeting Mary Catherine, it led to, as I mentioned, examining the legislature. You know, everything we have today in this society is largely shaped by the law, right? And so I share with folks in ED&I workshops now that if we forget when we name off communities of color, we forget natives often. It's because they were forcibly removed. There's a reason they fell off the list. They didn't fall off, they were forced off the list. And we just forget. Or sometimes, you know, any group we miss is partly because the normative has pushed them out or forced them out. So we're working to reclaim that and always keep naming, right, in that equity, diversity, inclusion work. So one of the things that also drove me about this piece was how do we bring the unnamed back into our stories and reclaim it in the greater culture and American theater in particular too. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to, I have it on my iPhone, so how to.
Should we circle back? We can circle back to it later.
Yeah, I know, I just really wanted to play it right now. Ooh.
Oh, you found it?
Maybe, yeah, this might, okay. Well, sorry, this is not the smoothness. I mean, see, I know how to play it here.
Oh, hey, oh, yeah.
Just play it on this.
We can also hook it up over there to that jack,
Oh, yeah?
to the sound system.
I don't want to play, I don't mean to play the whole thing, I just wanted to share a little bit. So what do I hook it up to? Yeah, you just hit play on there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You can tap it.
But it's really finicky because if you go away from the screen, it shuts. Because I don't know how to use technology, and so I. Yeah, okay, maybe I'll just play it. Yeah, because I think you can hear it. It's okay. I'll send it again.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't really want to dwell on this forever. I just thought since it came up.
Did you have a question though, Shruti?
Yeah, I was wondering around, well, have y'all started working on the music and what does that process look like? You know, I'm wondering whether it felt important, because I know music is very sacred, you know, I mean, all the pieces. Feels like sort of reclaiming this sort of theater space in this, you know, in this sort of sacred way, no? So I'm wondering in terms of the music in particular, if it feels or felt important to work with, you know, musicians from the Mojave, you know, tribe, or what that looks like, you know, how you're negotiating that.
I think those are steps that are coming. You can probably speak specific to.
Or even just, yeah, where you're at with it.
Ty Defoe is very versed at sound and music making in his native tribal culture.
Yes, I will just say his culture has nothing to do with the Mojave and the music. I mean, you can probably like any music, right? Like I don't know a lot about. I don't want to start making generalizations because I don't know a lot about it. But you know, I think a lot of people, and this is a bit of a generalization, but a lot of people who are not native think that all native music is just like boom, 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 you know, some horrible drum beat. And the drum beat is very significant in a lot of different cultures, but it is not uniform. It is different. It is unique. And an Oto song is very different from a Ponca song. A Native American church song is very different from a Cherokee hymn. A Creek hymn is very different from some of the Pacific Northwest music that you'll hear from like the Tulalip. And so there is no Native American music. I mean, you can go into like a store in the Denver airport and hear a Native American flute, but like that's not, once again, it's a lot of what people encounter in terms of Native music in the United States is just a misappropriation of what was at one point an actual piece of music, in my view. So I would love. I mean, I'm sorry that I can't figure out how to play this in a louder manner. But I think you'll be able to hear it. I think I'll be curious. I'm just going to play a little bit. This is the Mojave have bird songs, and I had never really heard anything quite like this until I went out there, and I think it's just so beautiful, and it's really kind of amazing. But I got to tape some of it. So you kind of get the feeling, and I love that. And so I got to go out with Veronica, and I didn't, I'm not from the community, and I show up, and these guys were doing the bird songs, and I was like, oh, I really want to tape this. And I look around, like everyone from there has their their iPhones out, and they're taping it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to tape it. But if I were to, and Ty, so I'm not writing the music. But let's say I was, and Ty's going to take, I think, we haven't had this explicit conversation, but I'm sure will, because this is an important question. But yeah, I could put Cherokee music into this musical, and probably most Americans wouldn't bat an eyelash, because they're like, oh, she's Native, and that sounds kind of Native, and there's a drum, But the Mojave bird songs are they're so beautiful, and they're very specific. And so, I mean, I think we do, and Ty and I have had this conversation of how do we get that music into the play, and you do think musical and you think commercial, or you think, I mean, it doesn't have to be a commercial production, but you think it goes out into the world, and you're not going to be sitting in the room every time with the production team saying, well, who did you hire that's Mojave to sing the bird song? I mean, that may not be realistic. So how do we take that authentic music and put it into a musical in a way where it doesn't become bastardized? It's not easy. It's really not. So that's a challenge that we face. But
Catherine, can you talk a little bit about the Removal Act versus?
So what I really want to talk about is some of the legal framework, and I am a lawyer, so I always go to that. But
I can share that this is a setup because we want to do a little bit of an activity with you.
Yep.
As well. Yeah.
So this is some of where the native lands are. So these are just some of the tribes. Just so you know, first of all, it was all native land at one point, right? But you can see here where some of the tribes and reservations are as of today. And I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, but Colorado River is right on the border of California. Oops, wow, that doesn't work. It's right on the border of California and Arizona. In fact, they have lands in both states. Sure. No, we don't need the lights out. I think, Leslie, we don't need the lights out, do we?
I can try. Should I try?
Okay. So here are some maps that show where some different internment camps are. You can see the Colorado River Indian tribe is going to be in the far left, little bottom corner there, kind of the brownish one. And Gila River had a camp. There were just a lot that were, as Leslie said, a lot of them were then do you want to point to Colorado River, Eden? Just to the left.
Yeah, here. It's a little fuzzy when I get close.
Yeah. And then here's kind of a bigger view of like
All
across the
various
country
camps.
outside of the Southwest.
You can see the squares of the various camps.
Yeah.
I wanted to show.
So,
There was also one in Texas called Crystal City that's not depicted.
so for me as a lawyer, you know, we we do have this awesome thing called the Constitution of the United States, and it provides due process, and everyone has all these rights, and we're very, you know, you talk to Americans, right, and it's all about our democracy, and we take it to the world because the world needs to understand that our democracy is important. We provide freedom. We're very proud of the rights in our Constitution. Korematsu is a very disturbing case where an individual who had been interned in a Japanese American internment camp took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, so this violates my due process rights under the Constitution. You know, the president passes Executive Order 9066, and I didn't commit a crime, and not only that, I've never had my day in court. So usually when you are imprisoned, you are interned because you've committed a crime, what the Constitution requires is that the state or the federal government, whoever's imprisoning you, must, you know, give you a day in court where you get to see what you've been challenged with and litigate it, right? Like defend yourself. Well, the Supreme Court said that basically no, and that the federal government's actions in forcibly removing 120,000 Japanese Americans from their homes and incarcerating them solely based on their race. That was the only basis, right? There was no, you know, individual evaluation of, well, you've committed this crime or you've done this. It was just, you are this race, therefore the federal government can take you from your home and imprison you. Very scary. And this decision has never been overturned or overruled. So as of today, in the United States, Executive Order 9066 and the internment of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II is still totally legal. It would be, in my view, it would be like if Plessy v. Ferguson had never been overturned, right? Like, we're so proud of Brown v. Board of Education, so much that Chief Justice Roberts will give wonderful speeches about it at the opening of the African American Museum. Great, he should celebrate Brown v. Board of Education. How is it that we still have Korematsu as good law in this country? We also, at the same time, have a case in, yes?
I just want to add that Executive Order 966 refers to no specific racial or ethnic group or cultural group. It only refers to any aliens or something like that.
And so, it could be used, for example, to round up Muslims in this country with
Yes.
no change to the language.
Right, so when we are talking about detainment, as even Trump is, that's scary. This can be activated at any moment. And Asian Pacific Islanders have a history throughout time of being given, even after fighting in World War I and earlier than that, we've had a history of being given, fighting for citizenship, being given citizenship, and then it's revoked. So we don't have this sense of once you're a citizen, oh, that's it, I'm a citizen. It can be taken away at any time. Yeah.
But couldn't that order be implemented upon those that created it?
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on who's in power, right? I mean, that's the ultimate question is who is in power. And, yeah.
I just wanted to name that, that's already been happening.
That's right.
In the U.S.
Yes, absolutely.
In terms of like people being coined as terrorists through the Patriot Act and folks being incarcerated in federal facilities all over the U.S. So just, it's not, yeah.
And in the Japanese American National Museum, to your point, during that response after 9/11, the Japanese community really rose up because the protocol, the system of going toward internment was exactly the same. There's an inciting incident, then there's a hysteria, it gets whipped up, and then the legislation starts to come in, right? And then it gets implemented. Yeah. There's a whole document about that in the
About
museum.
the last point, it not being overruled or overturned, I think, I'm not a lawyer, but I think the Korematsu case was, the decision was vacated at a lower level, but so it's never been technically overturned or overruled in a sense, but the government gave up its case at a lower level, because Korematsu then, the lawyers for him appealed that case on the basis of I think some government behavior or something like that. But in any case,
You're saying they released him, or?
well, no, this is like 40 years later, 50 years later, where they at a lower level, lower than the Supreme Court, the government basically vacated their case and said, sorry, there was a mistake.
And lawyers love to, there are all these nuances, right? And I can explain the procedural makeup of different cases, but, for me, I look at this and I'm like, we as theater artists know that the power of story, right? Story is powerful. I think that's why we're all in this room. That's why we're all in careers that involve theater to some extent. And I'm also, as a lawyer, I see the power of story in the law, right? And I think there's this constant question of, do the laws shape our culture and our stories, or do our stories shape the law? And I think it's a two-way street, but I think that, what is good law for the Supreme Court becomes our story, right? It does. And the Supreme Court tells stories to justify the law. So if you read Korematsu, there's a story about the dangers imposed by these enemy aliens. Like, that story is strung throughout. It's used to justify the outcome in this case. So when the case, even if, like, let's say, you could talk to someone in the Obama administration, they'd say, of course we're not going to enforce this decision. We're not going to cite Korematsu in a brief and say, well, we get to do X, Y, Z because of Korematsu. So they might argue, it doesn't even have any practical effect anymore. No one's using it. Why is it still on the books? When is the Supreme Court going to make that proclamation, this was a mistake? It was wrong. That hasn't happened. And so the narrative that was used to achieve this result in a Supreme Court case has never been publicly disclaimed, right? Has never been altered. And how does that affect us still today? And I see it as a citizen of Cherokee Nation very explicitly, because we have a case that happened in 1978 where the Supreme Court took away the jurisdiction of our tribes to exercise criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians who come onto our lands and commit crimes. So today, if you're a non-Indian, you could, for instance, walk onto the Colorado Indian Tribe Reservation as a non-Indian, rape, kill, murder, whatever, and the tribal government can't arrest you, can't prosecute you. They have no jurisdiction to do anything over you whatsoever. And so Oliphant is a very troubling case, but they cite a horrific case for us from 1823 that's never been overturned called Johnson v. McIntosh. And in that case, and the Oliphant case quotes this case, quote, their rights occurring to Indian nations to complete sovereignty as independent nations are necessarily diminished. And in Johnson v. McIntosh, the Supreme Court said that Indian nations cannot claim legal title to their land, because keep in mind, Korematsu, the need is, we need to forcibly remove everyone from their home and lock them up. In Johnson, the need was, we need to take their homes from them, right? Like, we need that land. And so we need to justify that they're racially inferior. And the words were savages and heathens, was what the Supreme Court used in 1823, to basically say, it's totally cool to take their land. In fact, it's our legal right to do so. Now, that case has never been overturned. And these are some awesome quotes from Johnson. The one in the red in the middle is one of my favorite. The Johnson court said, "Conquest gives a title which the courts of the conqueror cannot deny." Basically saying, we're the court of the conqueror, Indian nations are being conquered, they can't claim title to their land, we're the court of the conqueror. That has never been overturned. And so, for me, I look at, and yeah, the other really awesome quote is the bottom one, but the tribes of Indians inhabiting this country were fierce savages, whose occupation was war, and whose subsistence was drawn chiefly from the forest. Blah, blah, blah. It's just horrific. Still good law today. Now, in the 1830s, when my grandfathers were fighting to save Cherokee Nation, President Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act, which said, on using these principles of law, Indian nations, you're going to be moved out west of Mississippi. And, that was, greed and other things, as you can imagine. They wanted to expand cotton and slavery and everything in the Southeast. At that time, the performance of Native identity on the American stage was being appropriated, and red face was becoming very popular. There were plays in New York at that time where white people would get on stage and put a fake headdress on and paint their face red and whoa, whatever horrible, offensive, stupid thing you could think of. Indians were portrayed as a costume, as a prop, as something to laugh at, as something that could be killed without consequence. Because that's the story, that's the narrative that was necessary to promote this legal framework. And it's sad to me that today in 2016, very little has changed. And this is my whole mantra on red face, which we don't have to sit here and read through. But I guess a part of me, as a theater artist, when I hear our communities talk about, well, why is red face more popular than producing actual Native artists? Well, why do they use yellow face? Look at us, we're here. Why don't they just let us represent ourselves? It's like, well, what is the dominant narrative in our legal structure, right? And how have, over the last several hundred years, performance of our identity been used to support that legal structure in the Supreme Court and across the United States? And so how do we start to talk about that in a way? Because I think when most Americans hear, hey, do you know that there's this 1823 Supreme Court case and how problematic that is? They're like, oh my gosh, what can we do to change that? Well, let Native people tell their own stories. Put actual Native people on stage, because I think the narrative is a false one, right? The narrative that perpetuates these horrible legal inequalities or injustices depend intrinsically on a false narrative, on a narrative that strips us of our inherent identity, right? That dehumanizes us. You have to conquer a people, to destroy them, you have to strip them of their humanity first. That's what yellow face and red face do. And so, anyways, I just wanted, that part of what we're doing here is to place it in the larger context of what does this really mean in the United States today. So for me, putting actual Asian people, actual Native American people on the American stage is an act of revolution, I think, politically and socially. So, all right, that's all I got. Turn it back over to Leslie.
Sure. Thanks for being with us. Yay. So I'd like to take us through now, just for a few minutes. But I actually want to give the group the opportunity to have choice here, because this is personal work. So if we want to bring our HowlRound session to a close and say farewell to our friends for now about it, I'll describe a little bit about the process, and I would like you to weigh in to see if you'd like it to have our session come to a close so we can continue with the activity. I'll be breathing you back generations and giving you the opportunity to process what is your historical context, what have you been carrying with you, and bring us back into the present here, and we'll have an opportunity to share a bit and for you to be able to just process that, really, because that's the work, the basis of the work that we've been conducting for ourselves, along with all this research that we've shared, in order to continue to move through this process, hopefully as awarely as possible, and even reclaiming, like I mentioned, a thoughtful process for ourselves. So is that something that you would like to do without being on camera? I think that's my instinct, but I just want to make sure we have the will of the group. I see a couple of yeses. Okay, I think that's all we need to know then. Yeah, even if one person feels that way. So for HowlRound, thank you so much. I hope folks who have been able to tune in are enjoying the CAATA ConFest captures that we've been able to provide, and we'll sign off for now. Thank you so much. Okay.